That cold evening, no one expected a rusty metal door to change a life. What started as just another abandoned storage unit became a story the whole town tried to explain, and few had the courage to tell. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here we show that behind locked doors and forgotten boxes, there are still human hearts. Eleanor gripped the steering wheel of her old sedan, the engine ticking like a weary heartbeat as she pulled into the lot of Sunset Storage. The sun hung low, painting the chain-link fence in bruised oranges and purples, casting long shadows over rows of dented metal doors. The air was thick with the scent of warm asphalt and rust, the kind that clung to your skin long after you'd left. Distant traffic hummed beyond the fence, a reminder of the world moving on without her. She glanced in the rearview mirror at her daughter Mia, 9 years old, and curled up in the back seat, thumb in her mouth, a habit Elena hadn't broken since the accident 2 years ago. Mia's eyes were half closed, exhausted from another long day at school and the endless shuffle of their temporary apartment. This was it, their last shot. Elena had scraped together every penny from her part-time job at the diner, plus the widow's benefits that barely covered rent. The auction notice had come like a whisper of hope. Abandoned units, contents sold as is to the highest bidder. She'd driven past this place 100 times, watching retirees and bargain hunters mill about, but never imagined she'd be one of them. Now, with the foreclosure notice burning a hole in her glove compartment, it felt like gambling her soul on a locked door. The auctioneer, a grizzled man with a clipboard and a voice like gravel, nodded her toward Unit 47 at the far end of the row. $500, he'd said, barely glancing at her. You win it, it's yours. No refunds, no peeking first. Her hand had trembled as she raised the bid, heart pounding against her ribs. 500 was 2 months' rent, Mia's school clothes, the therapy sessions they couldn't afford anymore. But what if there was something inside worth 10 times that? Furniture she could sell, tools for a side hustle, anything to keep the lights on. Eleanor killed the engine and stepped out, the gravel crunching under her sneakers. The lot was emptying now, the other winners hauling away their prizes, boxes of clothes, rusted bikes, forgotten furniture stacked like ghosts. Unit 47 squatted at the edge, its door scarred and faded, the padlock hanging loose like an afterthought. She fished the new key from her pocket, the metal cool against her palm, and hesitated. What if it was empty? Or worse, filled with someone else's trash, another dead end in a life full of them. "Mum?" Mia's voice was small from the car. "Are we done?" Eleanor forced a smile, turning back. "Almost, sweetie. Just need to lock it up for tonight. We'll come back tomorrow." She couldn't face opening it now, not with the sun dipping and Mia's bedtime looming. The weight of the day pressed on her shoulders. Diner grease still under her nails, the echo of her late husband's laugh in her mind. Tom had been the fixer, the one who dreamed big. Now it was just her, piecing together scraps. She snapped the padlock shut, the click echoing down the empty corridor of doors. The fluorescent lights buzzed to life overhead, harsh and flickering, illuminating peeling paint on the concrete walls. Dust motes danced in the beams, and the faint smell of oil seeped from the cracks. Elena led Mia back to the car, her mind already racing ahead. What could be inside? She'd seen stories online, people finding antiques, cash, even cars, but this unit had been sealed for years, the auctioneer said, abandoned after the owner vanished. No family to claim it. Hope flickered, fragile as a match in the wind. They drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past. Their apartment was a cramped one-bedroom on the outskirts, the kind with thin walls and a landlord who knocked too often. Elena tucked Mia into bed, smoothing the girl's hair, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "Tomorrow, we'll see what's inside. It might be our lucky break." Mia nodded sleepily, clutching her stuffed bear, the one Tom had won at a fair. Alone in the kitchen, Elena sank into a chair, the unpaid bills fanned out on the table like accusations. Electricity due, Mia's braces, the car repair that kept getting pushed. She poured a cup of weak tea, the steam rising in lazy curls, and stared at the wall. What if the unit held nothing? Just more junk to haul away, costing her what little she had left, or worse, something dangerous, illegal. She'd heard whispers at the diner, units with drugs, stolen goods, things that brought cops to your door. Her stomach twisted. She wasn't that person. She was a mom, a widow scraping by, not some thrill-seeker. But then her mind wandered to the possibilities. Tools, maybe. Tom had always talked about fixing things up, starting a workshop, or clothes, electronics she could resell online. Enough to get ahead, to give Mia a real Christmas this year. The thought warmed her, chasing away the chill of doubt. She imagined unlocking that door tomorrow, sunlight spilling in, revealing treasures that could rewrite their story. No more late nights counting change. No more explaining to Mia why they couldn't afford the field trip. Sleep came fitfully, dreams tangled with shadows and metal clangs. The padlock's click replayed in her ears, a question mark hanging in the dark. By morning, resolve had hardened. She dropped Mia at school with a quick hug, promising adventure, and drove back to Sunset Storage. The lot was quieter now, the sun climbing through morning haze, turning the air golden. A maintenance worker swept nearby, his broom scraping rhythmically against the concrete. He nodded as she passed, but Elena barely noticed, her pulse quickening with each step toward Unit 47. The key turned easily this time, the lock giving way with a soft scrape. She pulled the door up, chains rattling, and peered inside. Dust swirled in the light and the smell hit her first. Damp earth, something metallic like wet clay mixed with rust. Not junk, not empty. Lined against the far wall were barrels, dozens of them stacked neatly in rows, their surfaces dull and streaked with age. Steel drums, some sealed tight, others with faded labels peeling away. They weren't the chaotic pile she'd feared. This was deliberate, organized like a forgotten shipment waiting for pickup. Elena's breath caught. Barrels. What kind? Chemicals? Waste? Her hands trembled as she stepped closer, the concrete cool under her feet. The air inside was cooler, heavier, carrying a faint tang that made her nose wrinkle. She touched one, the metal cold and smooth, no give under her fingers. No markings she could make out, just numbers stamped faintly. Codes, maybe. Her mind spun, industrial waste, paint supplies, something valuable like resins or oils she could sell, or nothing good at all. She backed out, heart hammering, and relocked the door. Not yet. She needed to think, to understand. The worker glanced her way again, curiosity in his eyes, but she waved it off and hurried to her car. Driving away, the barrels loomed in her thoughts, a mystery pressing against her chest. Hope and fear tangled, pulling her toward an edge she couldn't see. This unit wasn't just a gamble anymore. It was a door to something deeper, something that could shatter or save them. And as the storage lot faded in the mirror, Elena wondered if she had the strength to find out. Elena sat in her car, engine idling, the storage lot stretching out like a faded photograph under the midday sun. The barrels haunted her, their ghostly outlines pressing against her eyelids every time she blinked. She couldn't just leave it like that, not after the drive back, the key turning in her hand like a promise she'd made to herself and Mia. But stepping inside again felt like crossing a line, into a space that didn't belong to her yet, not fully. She glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting Mia's face there, her daughter's trusting eyes, demanding answers Elena didn't have. The maintenance worker was still sweeping nearby, his broomstroke steady, almost meditative. He was in his late 50s, she guessed, with salt and pepper hair cropped short and a faded tattoo peeking from his sleeve. Something military, maybe. He'd nodded at her earlier, a flicker of recognition in his weathered face. Now, as she stepped out, he paused, leaning on his broom. "You the one who got 47. His voice was rough, laced with the local drawl, but kind, like he'd seen too many stories unfold here to judge. Elena nodded, wiping her palms on her jeans. "Yeah, Elena, just checking it out." She hesitated, the words sticking. Admitting the uncertainty felt like weakness, but the weight in her chest needed sharing, even if just a little. He set the broom aside and walked over, squinting at the door. "Name's Ray. Been sweeping these lots for 15 years. Seen all kinds. Folks finding gold, folks finding garbage. That one's been locked tight since before I started. Owner was some contractor type, vanished after a big job went south. No one's come asking." He scratched his chin, eyes narrowing. "What did you find in there?" "Barrels," she said, the word tasting foreign. "Stacks of them, steel ones, sealed up, no idea what's inside." Ray's expression shifted, a shadow crossing his features. He glanced around the lot, empty save for a distant truck rumbling in. "Barrels, huh? Not the usual. Most units are junk or boxes. Those look like shipping drums, industrial stuff. Could be anything. Paint, chemicals, waste from a site, or worse." He trailed off, then met her gaze. "You open any?" She shook her head, a chill prickling her arms despite the warming air. "Not yet. Felt off, like it wasn't meant for me to just poke around." He nodded slowly, as if weighing her words. "Smart. Some things here, they bring trouble. Cops, or the kind that don't knock first. But if it's legit, might be worth something. Resins, oils, contractors sell that scrap for cash." He paused, then added, "I got a crowbar in the shed. If you want, I can help you crack one open. No promises, but better with 2 sets of eyes." Elena hesitated, her mind flashing to Mia at school, the diner's shift waiting later. Trusting a stranger in a place like this? But Ray's eyes held no greed, just the quiet steadiness of someone who'd watched lives pivot on small choices. "Okay," she said finally, "just one. To see." They walked to the unit together, the gravel shifting under their feet like whispered warnings. Ray fetched the crowbar, its handle worn smooth from use, and Eleanor unlocked the door again. The interior loomed cooler now, the dust settling into a hazy veil. The barrels stood sentinel, their metallic sheen catching the light in dull glints. Up close, she noticed faint stamps on the sides, codes like HAS 47, and serial numbers etched in faded ink. The smell was stronger too, earthy and sharp, like soil after rain mixed with something acrid. Ray whistled low. "These ain't hobby drums. Look at the seals, professional, probably from a construction gig, sealing up materials or debris." He chose one near the front, smaller than the others. Its lid rusted but intact. With a grunt, he wedged the crowbar under the edge, muscles straining as metal screeched against metal. Elena's heart pounded in her ears, the sound echoing off the walls like a confession. The lid popped free with a hiss of escaping air, stale and musty. Ray shone his flashlight inside, the beam cutting through the dimness. Elena leaned in, breath held. No chemicals, no glowing hazard, instead dirt, packed earth, dark and clumped with bits of rock and what looked like roots tangled in it. But not just any dirt, layered carefully, like samples from a dig, wrapped in plastic sheets that had yellowed with age. "Soil?" Elena murmured, reaching out but stopping short. Her fingers hovered, trembling slightly. "Why store dirt?" Ray frowned, poking at it with the crowbar's tip. A small vial tumbled out, glass intact, labeled in precise handwriting, Site 12, Core Sample. He picked it up carefully, turning it in the light. "This is testing stuff. Geotech samples. Contractors take them to check ground before building. Foundations, contamination. But why here? And sealed like this?" He set it down gently. Your owner's name was Harlan something. Harlan Reed. Heard he was in environmental cleanup, dealing with old sites. Messy business. Toxic spills. Buried junk from decades ago. Elena's stomach knotted. Cleanup. The word conjured images of yellow tape, men in suits, the kind of news stories that ended with fines or worse. You think it's dangerous? Like hazardous waste? Could be, Ray admitted, wiping sweat from his brow. If it's contaminated soil, touching it wrong could mean reports, inspections. Feds get involved fast, but these look archived, not active. Maybe he was holding evidence or samples for a lawsuit. He relocked the lid loosely, the click sharp in the quiet. I'd stop here. Call the facility manager tomorrow, see if there's records, or the auction folks. Don't go digging alone. She nodded, but fear coiled tighter, visions of police lights flashing in her driveway, Mia's face pale with confusion. What if Harlan's vanishing wasn't just burnout? What if someone wanted these buried, literally? The thought made her skin crawl, the unit's shadows deepening as the sun shifted outside. This wasn't treasure. It was a ghost's unfinished work, heavy with implications she wasn't equipped to handle. They stepped out, Ray sliding the door down. Listen, Elena, if you need backup, I'm here most days. Seen too many folks bite off more than they can chew. His voice softened. You're doing this for your kid, right? I can tell. That's worth protecting. Thanks, she whispered, the kindness landing like a lifeline in the industrial chill. Driving away, the barrel's weight followed her, heavier than before. At home, she picked up Mia from school, forcing smiles through stories of playground games. But dinner was quiet, her mind replaying the vial's label, the dirt's dark promise. Night fell, the apartment's walls closing in, and Eleanor lay awake, Tom's old watch ticking on the nightstand. Responsibility pressed like a hand on her shoulder. Call the police and risk everything, or probe deeper and invite shadows. The moral fork loomed, sharp and unforgiving, as the hum of the city outside mirrored the unrest in her chest. Tomorrow she'd return, but with what courage she couldn't say. Elena couldn't shake the vial's image, its fragile glass glinting like a warning in her dreams. By morning, the apartment felt smaller, the walls echoing with unspoken questions. Mia chattered over cereal about a school project on rocks and soil, her small hands gesturing wildly, and Elena forced a laugh, but her mind was back at the unit, buried under layers of damp earth and secrets. Sounds fun, sweetie, she said, ruffling Mia's hair. Maybe we'll learn something new today. The words tasted like irony, heavy on her tongue. She dropped Mia at school with a quick kiss, the routine a fragile anchor in the storm brewing inside her. The drive to Sunset Storage was tense, her fingers drumming the wheel, the radio static, mirroring her thoughts. Ray had said to call the manager, but caution pulled her back. Once authorities knew, it could all slip away. The unit seized. Her $500 a fool's bet. What if the samples were valuable? Harlan Reed's work, archived here, could be evidence in some forgotten case, worth consulting fees or even a settlement. Or it could be poison, literal and figurative, drawing inspectors who'd shut her down before she started. The lot was busier now, a few workers hauling carts, the sun beating down on the metal roofs like judgment. Ray was near the office, wiping down a fence post, his movements deliberate. He spotted her and straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. Back already? Figured you'd sit on it a day. Couldn't, Elena admitted, falling into step beside him as they headed toward Unit 47. The gravel crunched underfoot, each step amplifying the knot in her gut. Mia's project got me thinking. Soil samples. If it's just old dirt, maybe it's harmless. Educational even. But her voice wavered, betraying the lie. Educational. This felt like trespassing on a grave. Ray unlocked the side gate for her, his keyring jingling like distant chimes. Harmless or not, prying deeper's a risk. But I get it. Need to know. Inside the unit, the air was stiller, cooler, the barrels casting elongated shadows across the concrete floor. The opened one sat askew, its lid propped like an invitation to folly. Eleanor's skin prickled, the metallic tang sharper now, mingling with the faint must of undisturbed time. They approached the next barrel in line, larger, its surface etched with more stamps. ENV Site 8, and a date from 5 years back. Ray tested the seal with his crowbar, the metal groaning in protest. This one's tighter, might need more force. Elena nodded, her breath shallow, hands clasped to steady them. As the lid gave way, a puff of dust rose, carrying a sweeter undernote, something organic like decaying leaves mixed with the earth. Flashlight beam steady, Ray illuminated the contents. More soil, but varied, layers of reddish clay, flecked with what looked like metal shards and plastic fragments. Nestled among them were folders, yellowed and bound with rubber bands that had long since perished, crumbling at the touch. Elena knelt, heart thudding, and lifted one carefully, the paper crackling like dry bones. Pages of reports, charts scribbled with notes in Harlan's precise hand, contamination levels, chemical analyses, references to Site 8, industrial runoff, elevated lead and solvents. Jesus, Ray muttered, peering over her shoulder. This is fieldwork data. He was documenting pollution, old factory grounds, probably. Look here. He pointed to a photo clipped inside, a barren lot cordoned with tape. Bulldozers idle, workers in hazmat suits. Below it a memo, discrepancies in reporting, client pressure to bury findings, meeting with EPA pending. Elena's throat tightened, the words blurring as fear sharpened her vision. Bury findings. Harlan hadn't just stored samples, he'd hidden proof. Of what? Corporate cover-ups. Fines dodged at the cost of poisoned ground. Her mind raced to headlines she'd skimmed at the diner, scandals where whistleblowers vanished, their work erased. He disappeared after this? What if they came for him? Ray's face hardened, lines deepening around his eyes. Possible. Environmental gigs get dirty, big money, bigger enemies. Developers don't like bad soil reports killing deals. If these are legit, they could reopen cases, name names. He closed the folder gently, as if sealing a wound. But you're in it now. Found it on your dime. Cops could impound the lot, question you for days. Or worse, if the wrong eyes see this, you become a target. The unit's confines pressed in, the barrels like silent witnesses, their cold surfaces reflecting her pale face. Elena stood, legs unsteady. The concrete's chill seeping through her shoes. Call the police. That was the rule, the right thing. Report the discovery. Let experts handle the mess. But then what? The unit gone, her investment dust, Mia's future no brighter. Pretend she saw nothing, haul the barrels to a dump, sell what she could as scrap. The thought soured her stomach, a betrayal of the integrity Tom had instilled. The quiet lessons of doing right even when it hurt. Find the whole truth first, Ray said, echoing his advice from yesterday, his voice a steady rumble in the dimness. Check for more docs, a name, contact. If it's a dead man's work, maybe his family's out there, deserving closure. I knew a guy in cleanup, lost his brother to something similar, said partial truths eat you alive. He glanced at her, compassion softening the grit. You're tough, Elena, raising a kid solo after. Well, I see it in your eyes, but don't let fear decide alone. She nodded, but the crossroads loomed sharper. Integrity versus survival, truth versus the fragile peace she'd built for Mia. They sealed the barrel, the lid's thud final, and stepped out into the glare. The sun warmed her face, but inside, shadows lingered. Driving to the diner, the reports burned in her bag on the passenger seat, a weight heavier than steel. Shift dragged, orders called, plates clattering, smiles plastered for tips. But her thoughts circled Harlan's notes, the soil's dark secrets. What if one barrel held the key to justice, a payout from a settled case, or exposure that dragged her under? Evening brought Mia home, her backpack slung low, eyes bright with drawings of layered earth. Look, Mom, like a cake, but dirt. Elena hugged her tight, inhaling the scent of crayons and innocence, vowing silently to shield this world from the one unraveling. Bedtime stories blurred, her voice distant until Mia slept. Alone, Elena spread the papers on the table under the kitchen's harsh bulb. The fluorescent buzz, a mocking echo of the storage lights. Pages turned, revealing emails printed faint. Harlan to a colleague. Can't sign off on falsified data. This site's a time bomb. Then a final note, undated. If I go quiet, check Unit 47. Truth's in the barrels. Her breath hitched. He'd planned this. A vault for his conscience. Tears pricked, not for him, but for the choice now hers. Return it all? Risk the fallout? Or unravel it piece by moral piece and hope for redemption? The clock ticked past midnight, the city's hum a distant lullaby, as Eleanor weighed the doors before her, some locked in steel, others in her soul. Tomorrow she'd dig deeper with Ray's help, chasing clarity through the fear. But as sleep finally claimed her, one truth anchored. For Mia, she'd find the courage to choose right, whatever the cost. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories of courage in forgotten places can travel. The morning light filtered through the apartment's thin curtains, casting striped shadows across the kitchen table where Harlan's papers lay scattered like fallen leaves. Elena hadn't slept much, her mind replaying the note's stark words. If I go quiet, check Unit 47, truth's in the barrels. It felt like a plea from beyond, heavy with the finality of someone who'd known the cost of speaking out. She folded the documents carefully into her bag, the paper crinkling softly, and brewed coffee that tasted bitter on her tongue. Mia was still asleep, her small form a bundle under the covers. Oblivious to the storm, Elena carried alone. The drive to Sunset Storage felt longer today, the outskirts blurring into a haze of strip malls and chain-link fences. Elena's hands gripped the wheel tighter, knuckles whitening as doubts swirled. What if Harlan's truth implicated powerful people, developers, corporations with lawyers who crushed little guys like her? Reporting it could mean subpoenas. Endless questions, her name in reports that painted her as an accomplice just for buying the unit, but keeping silent. That gnawed at her conscience, a quiet erosion like the contaminants Harlan had documented. Tom would have said to do the right thing, his voice steady in her memory, even when it meant losing a job or facing hard stares from neighbors. Ray was waiting by the unit when she arrived, his truck parked crookedly nearby, toolbox open on the tailgate. The lot hummed with midday activity, a distant forklift beeping, the faint scent of diesel mixing with the ever-present rust. He looked up as she approached, his face etched with concern, the lines around his eyes deeper in the harsh sunlight. "Brought the papers?" he asked, voice low, as if the barrels might overhear. She nodded, pulling them from her bag. "And this?" She handed him the note, watching his brow furrow as he read. The gravel shifted under her feet, a small sound swallowed by the quiet tension between them. Ray folded it back, exhaling slowly. Man was prepared. That's not just paranoia. That's a man tying off loose ends. He glanced at the door, its metal surface warming under the sun. "We open more, or call it in now?" Eleanor's gaze drifted to the padlock, its chain glinting like a barrier she both feared and needed to cross. "More?" she said finally, the words scraping out. "Just enough to understand. If it's evidence, I can't hand it over blind." Ray didn't argue, just fetched his crowbar, the tool's weight familiar in his calloused hands. They stepped inside, the door rattling up to reveal the barrel's orderly ranks, shadows pooling at their bases like unspoken regrets. This time, they targeted a cluster in the back. Taller drums banded together with straps that had frayed over time. The air inside was thicker now, carrying a subtle undercurrent of dampness, as if the soil within breathed. Ray pried at the first seal, the metal resisting with a low groan that echoed off the concrete walls. Elena held the flashlight steady, her arm aching from the tension, beam trembling slightly as the lid lifted. Dust moted the light and the smell bloomed. Earthy, yes, but laced with a chemical bite, like vinegar mixed with wet stone. Inside, the contents were more complex. Not just soil, but stratified layers sealed in clear plastic liners, each tagged with meticulous labels. Vials of liquid, murky and separated, nestled beside them, alongside a leather-bound ledger, its cover cracked and swollen. Elena's fingers brushed the spine, hesitating before pulling it free. Pages yellowed with age, filled with Harlan's handwriting. Dates, locations, measurements of toxins, arsenic traces, PCB residues from old manufacturing sites. One entry caught her eye. Site 12 refusal. Client demands clean report. Refused. Sample secured here for protection. Ray leaned in, his breath warm against the cool air. This is the smoking gun. He's got chain of custody notes, signatures from labs. If this went public, it'd tank developments, cost millions in cleanups. He flipped further, stopping at a clipped newspaper article, faded but legible. Contractor missing after dispute with Apex Development. The date matched Harlan's last entry. Elena's pulse quickened. The unit's confines suddenly claustrophobic, the fluorescent hum from outside buzzing like an alarm. "What happened to him?" she whispered. Though she knew Ray couldn't answer, the thought of Harlan, tired eyes, maybe like Ray's, pouring his life into this, stirred something raw in her chest. A man who'd chosen truth over safety, vanishing into the ether, leaving his burden for a stranger. She imagined his family, if he had one, wondering still, photos gathering dust on a mantle. Ray closed the ledger gently. Folks like him don't just disappear. Pressure builds, threats, accidents. I lost a buddy in construction. Similar story, buried reports on a bridge collapse. Family got nothing but condolences. His voice cracked slightly, a rare vulnerability breaking through the stoic facade. He met her eyes, steady but shadowed. "You're not him, Elena. But you're holding his fight now. Call the EPA anonymous tip or find kin. Wrong move and it bites back." The moral weight settled heavier, pressing on her lungs. Outside, the sun slanted lower, painting the doorframe in golden streaks. But inside, the light felt false, illuminating choices she dreaded. Report it all, let justice roll, but risk the unit's seizure, her dreams of stability crumbling like the ledger's edges. Or probe for Harlan's next of kin, return the barrels quietly, preserve the fragile hope of resale or salvage. Mia's face flashed in her mind, her laughter at breakfast a tether pulling her toward caution. Yet Tom's voice echoed, "Integrity's the only inheritance worth leaving." They sealed the barrel, the thud reverberating like a heartbeat in the dim space. Ray wiped his hands, leaving smudges on his jeans. "Take the night. I'll watch the lot. No one's poking around without me seeing." His offer hung there, simple and profound, a bridge across her isolation. Elena thanked him, voice thick, and drove away with the ledger in her bag, the papers whispering against the seat. The diner shift blurred into a haze of clinking dishes and murmured orders. The grease-slick air, a stark contrast to the unit's chill. Tips were meager, her smiles mechanical, but each glance at her phone, searching Harlan Reed's name, tightened the knot. Obituaries, no hits. A old profile, environmental consultant, survived by a sister in the next county. Hope flickered, dim but real. Evening brought Mia's school play, a simple skit about explorers unearthing treasures in the earth. Watching her daughter on stage, beaming under paper-mache rocks, Elena's resolve hardened. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about legacy, teaching Mia that buried truths deserved light, even if it scorched. Home again with Mia tucked in, Elena sat under the kitchen light, the ledger open. A faded photo slipped out, Harlan, younger, arm around a woman smiling at a riverside, his sister. The address scribbled on the back was current. Contact her, explain the find, or authorities first, ensure the chain stayed unbroken? Fear clawed. Visions of men in suits at her door, questions about how a diner waitress ended up with corporate poison, but compassion stirred deeper for Harlan's unfinished story, for the ground he tried to protect. The clock ticked toward midnight, the apartment silent, save for Mia's soft breaths down the hall. Elena traced the photo's edges, the moral crossroads sharpening. Expose the barrels and invite chaos, or seek the human thread first, weaving integrity into survival. Tomorrow, she'd call the sister, voice trembling but true. Ray's words lingered, partial truths eat you alive, a guide in the gathering dark. As sleep tugged at her, the barrels loomed in her thoughts, not monsters now, but vessels of reckoning, promising a path where courage might redeem them all. The phone felt like lead in Elena's hand as she dialed the number from the photo's back, the kitchen clock ticking past 9 the next morning. Mia was at school, her lunchbox packed with a note Elena had scribbled in haste. Dig deep today, explorer. The words mocked her now, hanging in the air like a fragile spell. The line rang, each tone stretching the silence in the apartment, the faint hum of the refrigerator underscoring her pulse. What would she say? Hi, I'm a stranger who bought your brother's secrets. The truth clawed at her throat, raw and unpolished. A woman's voice answered, cautious and edged with age. Hello? Elena's breath caught, the words tumbling out in a rush. The auction, the unit, the barrels, Harlan's name etched in faded ink. There was a pause, long and heavy, broken only by a soft intake of breath on the other end. Harlan, my brother. It's been years. They said he walked away, started over somewhere. No body, no trace. The voice cracked, laced with the quiet grief of unresolved endings. Her name was Laura, and she lived just 2 towns over, in a quiet suburb Elena could picture. Neat lawns, porch lights flickering at dusk. Laura agreed to meet at the storage facility that afternoon, her tone shifting from shock to a tentative resolve. If it's his, I need to see. He was always the stubborn one, fighting for what he believed in. Thank you for finding this. Eleanor hung up, her hand trembling as she set the phone down, the plastic warm from her grip. Relief mingled with dread, a cocktail that soured in her stomach. This wasn't just documents anymore. It was pulling a thread that could unravel lives, including her own. She grabbed her keys, the jingle sharp in the empty space, and headed out, the morning haze lifting to reveal a sky heavy with clouds. Sunset storage loomed under the gathering grey, the lot damp from an early mist, the air carrying the clean bite of wet earth. Ray was there, as promised, leaning against his truck with a thermos of coffee, steam curling like ghosts in the chill. He handed her a cup without a word, his eyes scanning her face. Called her? Yeah, Laura, she's coming soon. Elena sipped the coffee, bitter and grounding, the warmth seeping through the paper cup to her chilled fingers. The metal doors along the row gleamed dully, water beading on their surfaces, and the distant traffic hummed softer, muffled by the overcast sky. They walked to Unit 47 together, the gravel slick underfoot, each step echoing the uncertainty coiling in her chest. Ray unlocked the door, the chain rattling like loose change in a pocket, and they stepped inside. The barrels waited, unchanged, their steel skins slick with condensation, the smell sharper now, damp soil laced with that faint chemical edge like a storm brewing underground. Laura arrived 20 minutes later, pulling up in a faded blue sedan, much like Elena's own. She was in her 60s, hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a wool coat that hung loose on her frame. Her eyes, Harlan's eyes from the photo, were sharp but shadowed, carrying the weight of years unanswered. "Show me," she said simply. No pleasantries, her voice steady as she followed them in. The unit's cool embrace swallowed her, the fluorescent light from the open door casting her face in stark relief, highlighting the lines etched by worry. Elena pointed to the opened barrels, the ledgers and vials laid out on a tarp Ray had spread. Laura knelt slowly, her knees creaking, and traced a label with a trembling finger. Site 12. He mentioned that once, late at night on the phone. Said it was bigger than him, that the company wanted it swept under. Tears welled but didn't fall. She blinked them back, flipping through the pages with the reverence of someone reclaiming a lost relic. Apex Development. They pushed him out after a report went public. He wouldn't falsify data, said the ground was poisoned from their old plants. Leaded soil, chemicals leaching into water tables. Families lived there, Harlan said. Kids playing on contaminated dirt. Ray shifted uncomfortably, arms crossed, the crowbar propped nearby like a silent sentinel. Sounds like motive for vanishing. Whistleblowers don't last long in that world. His words hung, the air thickening, the faint drip of water from the roof punctuating the quiet. Laura nodded. Pulling a small notebook from her coat, Harlan's, she said, left with her years ago. Entries matched, warnings, names of executives, a timeline leading to his last call. He was scared. Said if anything happened, the unit held the proof. I thought it was paranoia. Now. Eleanor's heart ached, watching the sisters' quiet unraveling, the way her hands clutched the ledger like a lifeline. This wasn't abstract crime. It was a man's stand against greed, his life bartered for clean earth that no one else fought for. But the stakes pressed harder now. Laura's presence made it real, a family drawn into the web. "What do we do?" Elena asked, voice barely above a whisper, the concrete floor cold against her shoes. "Police? EPA? If we report it, they might seize everything. Question how it got here." Laura stood slower, her coat brushing dust from the top. He'd want it out. Justice for those sites, for the people affected. But you're right, it's dangerous. Apex is still around, bigger now. Retaliation. She trailed off, eyes meeting Eleanor's with a shared understanding. Mother to mother, survivor to survivor. You've got a child. I see it in you. Don't lose what you've built for this. The moral chasm widened, the barrels looming like judges in the dim light. Hand it over clean. Let authorities chase the ghosts, but risk the unit's loss, her 500 a vanished hope? Or help Laura quietly compile it all, send anonymous packets to regulators, preserve some shred of control? Tom's memory surfaced again, his steady hand on hers during hard times. Right isn't always easy, but it's the only path that holds. Yet fear whispered of consequences. Mia, without a home. Elena's name tangled in depositions, shadows from Harlan's past, knocking in the night. Ray broke the silence, his voice a low rumble. "One more barrel, see if there's a full chain, wills, contacts, then decide together." They chose a sealed one at the rear, its lid corroded but intact, stamps reading, "Final Archive, all sites." The crowbar bit in, metal screeching like a confession, the lid yielding with a rush of stale air. Inside, beyond the soil layers, lay a metal box, locked but shallow, engraved with Harlan's initials. Laura gasped, recognizing it, a safety deposit heirloom from their father. With a spare key from her notebook, she opened it, the click soft in the hush. Documents spilled. A will naming her beneficiary, affidavits swearing the sample's integrity, even bank statements showing withheld payments from Apex. Hush money refused, and at the bottom, a letter, unsealed, addressed to whoever finds this. Harlan's words filled the page. apologies to Laura. Regrets for the silence, a plea to expose the truth. The ground remembers, don't let it stay buried. Tears fell now, Laura's shoulders shaking as she read aloud, her voice weaving through the unit's chill. Elena's chest tightened, compassion flooding the fear, a bridge to the courage she needed. This one barrel wasn't just evidence, it was Harlan's soul, changing hands to her, demanding she carry the torch. They repacked carefully, the shadows lengthening as afternoon waned, the first rain pattering on the roof like hesitant applause. Outside, under the drizzle, Laura clasped Elena's hand, rain beading on their skin. "We'll do it right, together, for him, for your girl." Ray nodded, a silent ally, as they locked the door. Driving home through the downpour, wipers slashing the blur, Elena felt the shift, not just weight but purpose. The crossroads loomed, but light pierced the dark. Integrity as inheritance, one choice away from redemption. Mia waited with stories of rain-puddled playgrounds, and as Elena hugged her tight, the barrel's promise hummed, a life no longer defined by loss, but by the doors opened with quiet strength. The rain had eased to a fine mist by the time Elena pulled into the apartment complex, the wipers squeaking their final protest against the windshield. The barrel's secrets clung to her like the dampness in her coat. Harlan's letter folded carefully in her bag, its words a quiet thunder in her mind. Mia's school bus rumbled past as she parked, the girl's face lighting up through the window, waving wildly. Elena waved back, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, the weight of the day pressing like an unseen hand on her shoulder. Inside, the apartment smelled of leftover pasta and the faint lavender from Mia's shampoo, a small sanctuary against the storm outside, and the one brewing within. "Mom, it poured all recess! We made mud pies!" Mia burst through the door minutes later, backpack thudding to the floor, her sneakers tracking wet prints across the linoleum. Elena knelt to hug her, inhaling the clean scent of childhood mixed with rain-soaked wool, her heart aching with the fierce need to protect this innocence. "Sounds like quite the adventure," she murmured, helping Mia out of her coat. But as they moved to the kitchen, the ledger peeked from her bag on the counter, its cracked spine a silent accusation. Laura's voice echoed in her head. "We'll do it right, together." Right how? The path forked sharper now, each choice a shadow lengthening over their fragile life. Dinner was simple, macaroni reheated, carrots sliced thin, the clink of forks against plates, the only sound breaking Mia's chatter about mud pies turning into treasure hunts. Elena nodded along, her mind drifting to the unit's chill, the way the soil had gleamed under the flashlight, dark and unforgiving. Harlan's plea in the letter, "Don't let it stay buried." It stirred something deep, an echo of Tom's quiet resolve when he'd fought the insurance company after the accident, refusing settlements that shortchanged their future. But Tom hadn't faced corporate giants, vanished consultants, or the risk of losing everything for a principle. After Mia's bedtime, the apartment fell still, the rain pattering against the window like hesitant fingers. Elena spread the documents across the table once more, the kitchen light casting harsh pools over the pages. Ray had texted earlier, "Check the lot, quiet. Tomorrow we catalogue everything, no rushing." His steadiness anchored her, an unexpected ally in this industrial maze. His own losses hinted at in the way he spoke of buried reports and lost buddies. She searched online again. Deeper this time, the screen's glow illuminating her face in the dim room. Apex Development's site gleamed with glossy projects, new subdivisions on reclaimed land, promises of sustainable growth, but buried in forums and old news clips, lawsuits dismissed, whistleblower claims silenced, a pattern of accidental disappearances in the environmental sector. One article snagged her, a grainy photo of Harlan at a public hearing, his face gaunt but determined, testifying against Apex's soil certifications. "The ground remembers," he'd said then, words mirroring his letter. Elena's breath hitched, tears blurring the screen. He hadn't vanished by choice. Pressure had built until it broke him, his unit a final stand. Calling the EPA now felt urgent, a moral imperative to honor that, to prevent more families from building homes on poisoned earth. But the risks loomed larger, investigators swarming the unit, her name on reports as the finder, questions about why a single mom bid on abandoned storage. What if Apex's lawyers spun it, accusations of tampering, her diner job scrutinized, Mia's school pulled into the fray? Foreclosure was one threat. This could evict them from normalcy entirely. She paced the small space, the floorboards creaking under her socks, the scent of cooling pasta lingering like regret. Integrity demanded exposure, full, unflinching, letting the truth cascade like rain over the sites Harlan had mapped. Survival whispered alternatives, help Laura copy the files anonymously, mail them to regulators with no trace back to Unit 47, sell the barrels as scrap quietly, pocket enough to pay bills, let Harlan's ghost fade. But that betrayal soured in her gut, a quiet violence against the man who'd fought alone. Tom's watch ticked on the counter, its steady rhythm a reminder. We choose who we are in the hard moments, Elle. Sleep evaded her until dawn. Dreams tangled with barrels cracking open to release dark rivers, Mia's small hand slipping from hers in the flood. Morning brought resolve, fragile but forming. She dropped Mia at school with an extra hug, the girl's backpack bouncing as she ran off, oblivious. The drive to the storage lot was shrouded in fog, the outskirts ethereal, chain-link fences ghosting in the mist. Ray waited by the office, thermos in hand again, his truck's wipers idle now. "Slept?" he asked, handing her coffee, steam rising like unspoken worries. "Barely." Eleanor sipped, the bitterness matching her mood, the air heavy with wet asphalt and pine from nearby trees. They walked to the unit in silence, the gravel muffled, each door they passed a potential echo of her own. Inside, the barrels stood sentinel, condensation beading like sweat on their surfaces, the earthy tang sharper in the confined space. Ray had brought gloves and bins, methodical, like prepping a crime scene. "We document today," he said, voice low. "Photos, lists, then you and Laura decide the drop." They worked methodically, prying lids with care, the metals scrape a rhythmic underscore to the tension. More samples emerged. Vials of tainted water, core borings etched with contamination maps, affidavits from colleagues too scared to sign. One barrel held correspondence, emails from Apex execs, veiled threats wrapped in legalese. Cooperate or face contract termination. Harlan's replies were terse, unyielding. "Data doesn't lie, neither do I." Elena's hands shook as she catalogued, the flashlight beam trembling, illuminating charts of projected health risks, cancers in kids, birth defects from leached chemicals. The deeper truth crystallized. Harlan hadn't just documented, he'd safeguarded lives, his disappearance a casualty in a war over poisoned legacies. Ray paused, wiping his brow, the dim light carving shadows on his face. This could change things. Cleanups funded, sites reclaimed, but it paints a target. His eyes met hers, steady. "Your call, Elena. I've got your back either way." Compassion swelled, his quiet support a mirror to her own buried strength, turning isolation to alliance. By midday, the fog lifted, sunlight slanting through the open door in golden shafts, dust motes dancing like possibilities. They sealed the last barrel, the unit's air lighter somehow, secrets aired but not yet freed. Elena stepped out, the warmth on her face a tentative promise. Calling Laura en route home, her voice steadied. "We have it all. Meet tomorrow to plan the handoff." The sister agreed, relief threading her words. Eleanor hung up, the phone warm in her palm, the moral crossroads yielding to a path. expose it cleanly, with Laura, through proper channels, EPA first, lawyers if needed. No shortcuts, no silence. The cost might be high, interviews, delays on the unit's contents, but integrity would rebuild stronger, a foundation untainted. Afternoon brought the diner, the sizzle of grills and chatter of patrons, a grounding hum. Tips came steady, her smiles genuine now, laced with purpose. Mia's pickup was joyful, stories of fog-shrouded playgrounds blending with Elena's own unearthed truths. Bedtime came with a new story, tales of brave guardians protecting hidden treasures, Mia's eyes wide, clutching her bear. Alone, Elena traced the watch's face, the ticking affirmation. The barrels had shifted from fear to forge, one in particular, Harlan's archive, igniting a chain of courage. Tomorrow, the decision solidified, justice pursued, not for gain, but for the ground that remembered, and the lives it could still save. In the quiet night, hope flickered, no longer fragile but rooted deep. If this story already has your heart, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena reach more people who still believe in second chances. The days blurred into a tense rhythm after that foggy morning in the unit. The barrel's secrets catalogued and sealed once more, waiting like patients for their reckoning. Elena met Laura at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town the next afternoon. The rain-slicked windows fogging with their breaths, the scent of dark roast mingling with the damp wool of their coats. Laura's hands, veined and steady, spread the copies across the scarred wooden table, photos of the samples, scans of the ledgers, Harlan's letter transcribed word for word. Anonymous at first, Laura said, her voice a low thread over the hum of the espresso machine. We send the package to the EPA regional office, no return address. Let them trace it back through the auction records if they need to. But we include Harlan's will, makes it official, ties it to me as next of kin. Elena nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of a photo. Harlan at that hearing, his jaw set against the flashbulbs. The moral clarity had settled overnight, like sediment in one of those vials. Expose it all through channels that honored the truth without reckless abandon. No more hesitation at the lock. This was the key turning fully, the door swinging wide. And the unit? She asked, the question hanging heavy. If they seize it? Laura's eyes softened, meeting hers across the steam. They might inspect, but it's yours legally. The contents could qualify as estate property or evidence leading to restitution. Harlan's work saved sites. Maybe it saves you too. They sealed the envelope together, the tapes rip a small finality, and Laura dropped it in a mailbox on the way out, the metal clank echoing like a gavel. Driving home through the drizzle, Eleanor felt the weight lift fractionally. The sky's grey, a canvas for possibility rather than threat. Ray was her anchor in the weeks that followed, his texts a steady ping amid the uncertainty. Lots clear. How's the wait? The EPA's response came swiftly, a knock at her apartment door one crisp morning, 2 agents in plain suits, badges glinting under the fluorescent hall light. Elena invited them in, Mia at school, the kitchen table cleared of bills for the first time in months. They reviewed the documents with quiet efficiency, the air thick with the scent of fresh coffee she'd brewed out of habit. "This is solid," the lead agent said, a woman with sharp eyes and a notebook filled with notes. "Chain of custody holds through the auction. We'll secure the unit for analysis, but you're not in any trouble, Ms. Rivera. This could reopen investigations, major ones." The inspections began the next day, trucks rumbling into Sunset storage under a pale autumn sun, the lot alive with the beep of equipment and the murmur of workers in coveralls. Elena watched from her car at first, heart pounding against her ribs, the chain-link fence blurring through unshed tears. Ray stood beside her, thermos in hand, his presence a quiet bulwark. "They're careful," he murmured. nodding to the team in hazmat gear wheeling out the barrels on dollies, their steel skins catching the light in dull arcs. No contamination risks here, just truth. One by one, the drums vanished into a secured van, the unit's interior emptying like a confessional after absolution. Elena stepped inside at the end, the concrete floor echoing hollowly under her sneakers, dust swirling in the empty space, the faint tang of earth lingering like a memory. The legal wheels turned slowly but surely. Laura, as beneficiary, claimed Harlan's archived work, but the EPA's report credited Elena's discovery, looping her into consultations. Nothing glamorous, just statements and follow-ups over coffee in sterile offices. Apex Development crumbled under the renewed scrutiny. Fines levied, sites cordoned for proper cleanup, headlines flickering across local news like distant lightning. Whispers at the diner turned to nods of respect, patrons leaving extra tips with quiet, "Heard about that storage thing. Brave move." But the real windfall came quietly. A whistleblower fund disbursement, modest but steady, enough to cover back rent and Mia's braces without the sting of charity. The unit itself, deemed clear after testing, its lease extended gratis by the grateful facility owner, a blank slate for storage, or, as Eleanor dreamed, a small workshop. Rebuilding wove itself into their days like threads pulled from the barrel's dark weave. Eleanor quit the diner after 6 months. The grease and late shifts traded for part-time work at a local environmental non-profit, sorting data on clean sites, her voice gaining strength in community meetings. "The ground remembers," she'd say, Harlan's words her mantra, teaching Mia about soil layers during backyard digs, the girl's small hands caked in safe earth. Ray became more than a helper, a friend, then something steadier. Their evenings spent walking the storage lot at sunset, the hum of traffic a backdrop to shared stories of loss and quiet wins. He fixed her car one weekend, tools clinking under the hood, his laugh warming the oil-scented air. "Never thought sweep-in lots would lead here," he'd say, and Elena would smile, the weight of widowhood easing into partnership. Mia's world bloomed too, therapy sessions paid for, a school trip to a nature preserve where she collected her own samples, eyes wide with wonder. The apartment upgraded to a 2-bedroom rental, sunlight spilling through bigger windows, the walls no longer closing in. Elena learned new skills, basic lab protocols from online courses, turning the unit into a resale space for eco-friendly tools scavenged from auctions, each sale a small victory. Debts cleared, a savings account grew, but the true change was internal. From the exhaustion of scraping by to the clarity of purpose, fear transmuted into the courage to open doors, literal and otherwise. Months later, under a clear spring sky, Elena returned to Unit 47 alone. The lot bathed in the soft gold of late afternoon, the air fresh with cut grass and distant rain. The space stood empty now, shelves installed for her budding venture, the concrete swept clean, echoing with possibility rather than secrets. She ran a hand along the wall, feeling the cool metal of the doorframe, the faint buzz of fluorescence overhead, a familiar hum. Ray waited outside, engine idling, Mia's drawing of Mom's treasure barrels tucked in her glove compartment, a crayon map of hope unearthed. In that quiet moment, Elena reflected on the rusty door that had once loomed like judgment. Risks taken, truths claimed, a life rebuilt not by luck, but by the integrity to let buried light rise. Some doors we force, others we honor, and in choosing the latter, we find the courage that quietly changes everything. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, justice, and redemption. Thank you for watching the case of single mom bought a storage unit full of mystery barrels. One barrel changed her entire life. See you in the next one.